The Machiavellian art of never defending yourself. Listen, I want you to think about something for a second. There's this moment, this incredibly powerful split-second decision that happens when someone comes at you. Maybe they're calling you out. Maybe they're accusing you of something, questioning your worth, your character, what you really meant when you said what you said. And in that exact moment, what does the average person do? I'll tell you exactly what they do. They do what they've been trained to do their entire lives. They immediately jump into defense mode. Wait, no, I didn't mean it like that. That's not what I was trying to say at all. You completely misunderstood me. I swear to you, I'm not that kind of person. It sounds reasonable, right? It sounds noble, fair, like the right thing to do. But here's what I've learned from studying Machiavelli's principles. And this is going to sound harsh. But stay with me. That moment, that exact moment when you start defending yourself, is the precise moment you lose absolutely everything. Why? Because the second you feel the need to defend yourself, you're admitting something crucial. You're admitting that you're weak enough to actually need that defense. And in the brutal world of power dynamics, perception isn't just important. It's literally everything. If they see you flinch even slightly, they don't see a victim who needs sympathy. No, they see blood in the water. They see vulnerability. They see an opening. This is the absolutely brutal law that Machiavelli understood long before anyone else figured it out. The man who rushes to defend himself is essentially lowering himself in the eyes of everyone watching. But the man who refuses to defend himself, he forces the entire world to defend him instead. And that's where real power lies. Let me get one thing completely straight with you right now. Defending yourself rarely, and I mean rarely, actually convinces anyone of anything. What it really does is shift all the power away from you and hand it directly to your accuser. Because when you start justifying your actions, explaining yourself, trying to make them understand, you're playing on their field now. You've accepted their framing of the situation. You're basically saying, without even realizing it, you have the authority to question me. Your judgment matters. And once they have that authority, once they have that power over you, they completely own the narrative. Even if you're 100% right, even if the facts are completely on your side, you still end up looking guilty. Why? Because only weak people rush to explain themselves. The truly strong, they let the silence burn. They let that accusation just float there, untouched, unanswered, because they understand the real strategic move here. The real move is to turn that accusation into a mirror. Make them start doubting themselves instead. Make them look like they're being too emotional. Make them appear obsessed, bitter, maybe even a little unstable. Because here's a fundamental truth about human interaction. The person who speaks first, who reacts first, often loses complete control of the frame. And Machiavelli knew this better than anyone. Whoever controls the frame of the conversation controls the entire outcome. Most people defend themselves because they desperately want to be understood. They genuinely believe that if they just explain enough, if they clarify thoroughly enough, if they repeat themselves one more time, they'll finally be vindicated. Everyone will see they were right all along. But I've got to tell you, that belief comes from a place of emotional weakness, not strategic thinking. You don't actually want clarity. You want control. Clarity is for therapy sessions and heart-to-heart conversations. Control is for power dynamics. And real power doesn't come from being understood by everyone. It comes from being feared, being respected, and being completely untouchable. So when someone calls you arrogant, cold, selfish, or manipulative, and you immediately jump in with, no, you don't understand. Let me explain. You've already lost the game. Why? Because now you're reacting. Now you're proving that you actually care what they think. Now you've put the ball squarely in their court. And when you do that, you're giving up the most Machiavellian weapon you have in your arsenal. Mystery. Think about the most truly powerful people you've ever encountered in your life. I'm not talking about the loudest people or the most popular ones. I'm talking about the ones who held silence like it was a deadly weapon. The ones who made you second-guess yourself just by the way they looked at you. The ones who, when attacked, never even flinched. They just stood there, completely unmoved. Machiavelli would tell you something profound. The person who explains is submitting. The person who remains silent forces everyone else to fill in those blanks themselves. And people almost always overestimate the silent person. That's the entire game right there. When you don't react, something interesting happens. They get uncomfortable. They start doubting their own words. They look around the room for validation from others and find absolutely none. Suddenly their power is shrinking while yours is expanding exponentially. Because you've done the one thing that no emotional person can handle. You made them talk to themselves. And that's exactly how you flipped the entire power dynamic. You let their accusation die in the echo of its own weakness. Let me go even deeper with this. Imagine you walk into a room. Someone throws shade at you. Could be subtle, could be direct. Maybe it's a jab at your success, your attitude, something from your past. Everyone in the room immediately turns to see what you'll say. They're all waiting for your response. Here's your move. Say absolutely nothing. No defense, no retaliation, not even a smirk. Just calm, total, complete stillness. In that exact moment, you become untouchable. Why? Because everyone in that room is now forced to ask themselves, wait, why didn't he react? Does he know something we don't? Is he somehow above all this? Did that attack just make him look stronger? You've just flipped the entire social frame with nothing but silence. Because here's what people don't realize. The audience isn't actually watching the accusation itself. They're watching your response to it, and silence, when it's delivered with real presence and confidence, speaks so much louder than any justification or explanation ever could. Machiavelli knew this intuitively. He didn't just study politics and warfare. He studied human psychology at its deepest level, and he understood one thing better than almost anyone in history. Power isn't about what you say. It's about what people believe you could say, but deliberately choose not to. Now here's the coldest, most calculating move of all. Sometimes you don't just ignore the accusation. Sometimes you actually invert it. Someone calls you manipulative. You smile slightly, look past them like they're barely worth acknowledging, and say, if that's how you see it. Not defensive, not apologetic, just cool, neutral detachment. What happens next? They scramble. They completely scramble. Because they were hoping for a fight. They were hoping to watch you squirm, to see you get emotional, to prove they got under your skin. Instead, they're left holding their own weapon with nowhere to use it. That's when the guilt starts setting in on their side. They start wondering if they overstepped, if they embarrassed themselves, if they're the ones who look insecure now. And guess what? They absolutely do. You just took the energy they threw at you and made them carry it themselves, without you lifting a single finger. There's this critical moment when silence becomes absolutely unbearable. But not for you. It's unbearable for the person who expected a reaction from you. That's when the entire table turns. They thought they were the accuser, the one in the power position. Now they're completely exposed as the one desperately begging for attention, for validation, for any kind of reaction. And you? You just became something far more powerful than innocent. You became untouchable. Machiavelli understood something that most people will never grasp in their entire lives. Words are not meant to clarify truth. They're meant to obscure it. And when someone attacks you, either subtly or directly, what they really want is for you to fight through the fog. They want to drown you in emotional explanation, because the more you explain, the less certain you appear to everyone watching. So instead, you let them fill that silence. And what happens every single time? They overplay their hand. They repeat themselves. They start looking desperate, emotional, unstable. You've said absolutely nothing, but now they're the one under judgment. Why? Because the crowd isn't listening to what's actually being said anymore. They're watching who's calm and who's rattled. That's social power in its purest form. And it doesn't come from being right about the facts. It comes from being untouchable in your demeanor. Let me give you a concrete example. Let's say you're in a business meeting. Someone subtly undermines you. They say something like, I'm not sure that strategy is really thought through, or he always has these bold ideas, with just enough edge to make it a challenge. They're looking for a reaction. They want you to take the bait. What do most people do in that situation? They lean forward. They immediately start explaining. They try to prove themselves. They clarify. They get nervous. And the whole room can smell it. That anxiety. That need to be validated. But the Machiavellian operator, he leans back. He waits. Maybe he even allows himself a slight smirk. And if he speaks at all, it's not a defense. It's a redirect. Let's hear your strategy then. Now the attacker has to perform. The entire room flips. Suddenly they're the one being evaluated. They're under pressure. Because silence from a confident person is basically an accusation without words. It makes people feel small without you doing anything aggressive at all. In romantic or personal relationships, this principle becomes even more dangerous and powerful. Say your partner says, "You don't care about me anymore." The average person will absolutely panic. They'll launch into this whole thing. Explanations, reassurances, defenses. "Of course I care." "How can you say that?" "Let me prove it to you." And in doing all that, they're validating the emotional frame that was just set up. But the Machiavellian approach is completely different. You don't dismiss them. You don't argue. You let the weight of that accusation just hang there in the air. You watch them feel their own drama echo in the space between you. Then, with complete calm, you respond with something simple. "That's not how I see it." Short, grounded, no explanation, no justification whatsoever. Now they feel uncertain. They start questioning their own tone. They wonder if maybe they were being too reactive. Why? Because in that moment, you held power over what matters most in any relationship, the emotional tempo. And whoever controls the tempo controls the entire frame of the relationship. There's an even deeper, colder tactic I want to share with you. Don't just remain calm when you're accused. Disappear entirely. Someone insults you. Don't reply. Don't respond. Don't acknowledge it at all, but don't block them either. Just let your absence sit there like a mirror reflecting their own behavior back at them. This breaks people in two devastating ways. First, they realize you didn't even consider them worthy of a response. Second, they start spinning these internal narratives, and most of the time, it completely destroys their composure. Why does this work so well? Because the average person survives on emotional validation. Even in conflict, they need that back and forth. If you take that away completely, they wither. They spiral. They post more. They talk to others about you. They try desperately to bait a reply. And with every new attempt they make, they look weaker, more obsessed, more unhinged. All while you remain perfectly, serenely still. And that's when you win. Not because you proved anything, but because they destroyed themselves trying to get any reaction from you whatsoever. Here's where this gets truly elite level. Instead of defending yourself when attacked, you make their accusation look like a sign of their own weakness. Someone calls you arrogant? Strange that confidence makes people so uncomfortable. Someone says you're manipulative. Only people who can't be influenced say that. Someone calls you fake? Everyone says that when they stop getting what they want from me. You're not just denying the accusation. You're making it their insecurity, their problem, their weakness. And now they're the ones scrambling to defend themselves. It's not just a reversal, it's a complete power judo throw. You've used their own emotional force and turned it into their public collapse. Machiavelli would call this the turn of the blade. Don't meet the sword with a shield. Let the attacker fall on his own blade. The world constantly teaches you to defend your reputation, to explain yourself, to clear your good name. But Machiavelli saw the trap in all of that. He knew that the moment you start chasing innocence, you're admitting guilt on some level. So the true strategist never plays that game at all. Instead, he appears too composed to be shaken, too elevated to care about petty accusations, too clear on his position to waste time explaining it. And slowly, inevitably, those who try to tear him down start looking unstable, reactive, jealous, weak. Because the more you defend yourself, the more it looks like you desperately need to. But the more you ignore the attacks, the more dangerous people assume you are. And that assumption, that fear, is where real power is born. Most people think power is about proving yourself. Proving you're right, proving you're not what they say you are, proving you're better than their perception of you. But Machiavelli would just smirk at this entire mentality. Why? Because the second you try to prove anything to anyone, you've already declared that the other person's judgment is valid. You've given them authority over you. And when you hand someone that validation, you're basically handing them your leash. Let me paint another picture for you. You're in a group setting. Could be a social gathering, a dinner table, a professional meeting. Someone throws a public jab at you. You always act like you know everything. Oh, he's always like this. I guess being humble isn't your thing, huh? What do most people do in this moment? They tense up immediately. They try to laugh it off nervously. Or even worse, they respond with an explanation, trying to smooth everything over. They think they're saving face, protecting their image. But what they're really doing is confirming that a hit was landed. Now everyone's watching the defense, and that alone makes the original jab look true. Here's what the Machiavellian does instead. He pauses, holds silence for just 2 seconds, which feels like an eternity in that moment. He scans the room, not with aggression, but with quiet amusement, like he's observing something mildly entertaining. Then, and only if it's actually needed, he offers something calm, precise, and dismissive. You seem emotional today. Or, interesting take. Or sometimes nothing at all, just a long, still gaze. What happens next is completely predictable once you understand human nature. The attacker shifts uncomfortably. They fidget. They look for backup from others. They try to explain their joke, backpedal a little. They start feeling the heat of the entire room shifting onto them. Why? Because your lack of reaction just told the room something louder than words ever could. You're not the one under judgment here. They are. In the digital arena, things escalate even faster. Comments, posts, callouts, DMs, people constantly trying to bait you into reacting online. Here's the truth that Machiavelli would burn into your mind. In the court of public opinion, silence can speak guilt, unless your silence commands fear. That's the key distinction. So here's the tactic for the digital world. When you're attacked online, you don't defend. You don't explain at length. You distort the narrative. You don't address their specific claim at all. You redirect the energy back into the crowd watching. For example, someone says you're toxic or manipulative. Instead of posting some tearful defense or long clarification thread, you post something like, "People always call you dangerous when they can't control you." What just happened? You didn't defend yourself at all. You reframed the accusation into a badge of power. Now they look bitter and obsessed. You look completely unfazed. And the audience watching? They begin to question who's really in control of this situation. That's not damage control. That's narrative dominance. Let me get even more surgical with this. There are 3 specific tools you can use instead of ever defending yourself. First, silence. The default option, cold, powerful, leaves them completely exposed. Second, deflection. Reframe the entire narrative without even acknowledging the jab. Third, precision cuts. Short, sharp truths that end the game immediately. Let me give you some examples of precision cuts. Someone says, "You're full of yourself." You respond, "Confidence upsets the insecure." They say, "You're fake." You respond, "I don't owe you authenticity." They say, "You think you're better than everyone?" You respond, "No, I just don't think like everyone." These aren't defenses. They're status assertions. They don't say, "I'm not guilty." They say, "You can't touch me." And that's the absolute core of this principle. The Machiavellian never begs to be seen as good. He dares people to see him as bad and walks taller for it. When you refuse to defend yourself, something genuinely strange happens to your enemies. They become completely unhinged. Why? Because they expected a battle, and instead they're swinging at smoke. So they start escalating. They push harder. They get more dramatic and emotional. They expose more and more of their own insecurity with every attack. And the more they do this, the more you rise in the eyes of everyone watching. Why? Because you've made them perform their own collapse. You haven't had to do anything. And that's the true Machiavellian endgame. You don't actively destroy your enemies. You let their obsession with you destroy them instead. You might think that being misunderstood is dangerous. But I'm telling you, being predictable is far worse. The misunderstood man has mystery, intrigue, depth. The predictable man is easy to manipulate, easy to control, easy to dismiss. People who are always trying to clear things up, always explaining themselves, are seen as desperate. But people who remain calmly misunderstood, they are feared. They command respect. Machiavelli knew this when he wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." But even beyond that, it's better to be confusing than predictable. Because the confused opponent is a cautious opponent. He watches you carefully. He doesn't act rashly against you. And that means you control the entire field of play. Let me crush one final illusion for you. You don't need a good reputation to win in life. You need a strong reputation. There's a massive difference. The man with a good reputation is expected to be clean, soft, agreeable, nice. But the man with a strong reputation, he's not always liked. He's not always trusted. But no one, and I mean no one, dares move against him casually. They think twice. They hesitate. They reconsider. That's what happens when you never defend yourself. Your reputation transforms from being about what people believe to being about what they fear you might do next. That's how you flip the entire power dynamic. You stop fighting for approval from everyone. Instead, you create an aura that makes people cautious around you. Because even your silence feels like a calculated decision. Every move you don't make becomes a move in their mind. The final evolution of this principle isn't just silence. It's aura. It's a presence so composed, so secure, so far above the petty noise that accusations simply evaporate before they even land on you. And this doesn't come from being emotionless or robotic. It comes from being unbothered by design, by choice. Because once you've trained yourself not to defend, not to explain, not to seek validation from anyone, you cross a line where your very existence becomes the defense. And that's when power becomes completely effortless. Think about the few people in your life who never explain themselves. They don't post long rants on social media. They don't correct the record constantly. They don't argue with critics. And yet people respect them more than almost anyone else. Why is that? Because silence in the face of accusation creates myth. It invites interpretation. And the human mind, when left without an explanation, fills that void with strength, with power, with danger. People start assuming you must be dangerous somehow. You must know something they don't. You must be so secure in who you are that you don't even blink when challenged. And that assumption, that story they tell themselves about you, is what makes people follow you, respect you, fear you. Machiavelli didn't care about being seen as good. He cared about being in control, and the person who never defends themselves is always in control of perception, even when they're surrounded by lies and accusations. Here's a beautiful paradox I want you to understand. The more you explain yourself, the more alone you actually look. Why? Because no one feels the need to step in and defend you when you're already arguing on your own behalf so desperately. You're handling it yourself, so they stay out of it. But if you remain calm, if you stand silent and unfazed, people start to feel this urge to defend you. They start saying things like, "That was completely uncalled for. He didn't deserve that. Why are you coming after him?" He didn't even respond, and you're still pushing. Suddenly, other people become your shield. And what's better than defending yourself? Letting others do it for you without you even asking. That's Machiavellian leverage at its finest. Let the crowd argue your case while you remain elevated above the noise. Now you're not just respected, you're elevated to a different level entirely. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. You build it like a fortress, stone by stone, day by day, by consistently acting with restraint, by choosing stillness over reaction, by never explaining more than you absolutely must. Let me give you some practical starting points. Never correct insults that are clearly meant to provoke you. Let them speak. Let them echo into emptiness. Your silence tells the entire room that the insult didn't even register on your radar. Respond to indirect shots with calm confusion, not offense. "Is that how you see it?" said with total serenity. It completely dismantles the emotional energy behind their attack. Use short closing phrases instead of long defenses. Noted. Okay. Think what you like. Time will tell. Each one closes the door. It doesn't invite more debate. It ends the entire scene. Study how you hold your face, your body, your gaze. The Machiavellian never twitches, flinches, or tenses up. Stillness is his armor. And the more still you remain when others are losing control, the more your power expands silently, invisibly. When people don't know how to provoke you, when they can't figure out what buttons to push, they start to fear you. Why? Because you become unpredictable. Not erratic or crazy, but unreadable. You're like a mirror that reflects their own instability back at them. Machiavelli would say, "The most dangerous man is not the one who attacks first. It is the one who never needs to attack at all." You will reach a point where the attacks stop. Not because you fought them all off, but because people know they'll lose before they even start. Your very presence says, "I don't play defense. I let others destroy themselves while trying to reach me." There's a crucial difference between strength and immunity. Strength still flinches, still reacts, still gets emotional, even if it fights back effectively. But immunity, it doesn't even acknowledge the hit. That's the true Machiavellian ideal. You don't win the argument through superior logic. You end the argument before it even starts by never needing to answer it in the first place. Because when you no longer defend yourself, people stop seeing you as someone who needs to be put on trial. You're not on their level anymore. You've moved beyond the court of public approval, and the only judgment that truly matters is your own. From this point forward, you don't live in defense mode. You live in definition mode. You define your own image. You define your own tone. You define when to speak and when to let silence do the work. And people feel that shift. They feel the certainty behind your eyes, the calmness in your posture, the quiet danger in your stillness. You're not resisting anymore. You're commanding. And that's when the entire room shifts. The crowd speaks less around you. Your enemies grow quieter. Your name carries weight. Not because you fought for it, explained it, or defended it, but because you never felt the need to explain it in the first place. Never defending yourself doesn't mean never speaking. It means speaking only when it shifts the power in your favor. When you do say something, it should feel like a chess move, not an emotional response. Because every time you don't explain yourself, every time you hold perfectly still while the world spins around you, you become the one thing they absolutely cannot control. A person who answers to no one but themselves. And that, right there, is true power.